Welcome everyone to the Kent City Council workshop. Today is Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. Again, this is a remote meeting due to the COVID-19 health and safety requirements in order by the governor. This is a remote, again, a remote meeting. So welcome to anyone joining us on Kent TV 21, on the Facebook City of Kent, the YouTube Kent TV 21 channel, and also anyone that is dialing in to listen to the workshop. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening, so let's go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome Mark Howlett to talk about the Kent Design Construction Standards.
Thank you, Council President, Council members, and also have Suzanne Smith on the line. She's in the design section. She really spearheaded this effort, and she's available to answer some questions if they should come up. Anyway, next slide, please, Kim. The city has been specifying standards for quite some time. Looking back through the city code, the first reference I found to the city setting standards was Ordinance 23 passed in 1890, where we talked about wooden sidewalks, and it went into a lot of details about the dimensions and materials of those. And over the years, we've also passed off and on different types of standards that we've incorporated into our city code. The first reference I found to a manual was back in 1962, and that's when we adopted what you can see actually in the bottom right-hand corner there. We adopted a complete book of standards, and the sketch there is of an old handwritten fire hydrant, which is included in that manual. And then periodically over the years, we've done several updates to the book. The most recent one's been in 2009. So next slide, please. Thank you, Kim. The goals of these standards are really to set up the parameters for implementing the city's comprehensive plans. As you know, we have several different plans from the overall city's comprehensive plan, the sewer comprehensive plan, the city's surface water design manual, as well as the water comp plan and the transportation master plan. And the design and construction standards really implement the details of how we want the city to look and function. And also another goal of the plans of these standards is to set up a sound and efficient development. And really this book is really the rules that we want developers to follow, so that when they come to the city and want to develop, this is really the book that they can follow with all the standards and all the details of what we like to see. The other big goal of the standards is to set up standard parts and constructions. It's very important for us from a maintenance perspective not to have really a hodgepodge of parts and equipment out there. It's so much easier to work on standardized equipment. And then the last 3 goals there: stormwater management, environmental protection, and then transportation safety and the road network. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about these in a couple of minutes. So applicability, next slide, please, Kim. So these standards apply to all public improvements in the right-of-way. That would be as well as our operation crews that are doing work out in the right-of-way, as well as city hired contractors that do work out there. As the second and really the big component of the applicability of these is to the private developers who come in and want to build in our right-of-way. And I want to point out that these are not building codes. There's nothing building related in this manual. This is really just for the public works infrastructure that's in the right-of-way and in some cases on private property. Also applicable to this manual is any improvements intended for maintenance by the city, as well as other improvements that require the approval of the city. For example, if a private utility were to come in, say Puget Sound Energy, these standards would specify, say, for example, how they have to restore their trenches after putting them in. So next slide, please, Kim. So again, the overall purpose of the design and construction standards is really to set the standards of what we want the city to look like. And it really helps the developers navigate our system. I mean, they're looking to get their projects approved, and this manual helps them do that in a very efficient and productive manner. And also included, as I mentioned, the standardization of materials. We do provide flexibility. However, it's very important for us to have standard materials and a standard look for the city while providing, like I say, that flexibility. So next slide, please, Kim. Thank you. The manual is laid out primarily into 6 separate chapters and sections of the manual. And I'm going to go into more detail on each one of these, but first chapter is the general construction, general conditions and requirements, and then construction control and inspection, then followed by the more detailed sections of water, sanitary sewer, storm drainage, and street. And also adopted as part of these standards are, as an appendix, are also the Meet Me on Meeker standards and the downtown design guidelines. And then we also include in the manual real estate documents such as easements and right-of-way documents, right-of-way dedications that we need for building a lot of these projects. And also under each section, we have standard plans that are the drawings that specify what we want a lot of the equipment to look like. So next, thank you, Kim. So section 1, general conditions and requirements. Spoke a little bit about the overview already. It's really the goals and what we want of what the standards are and that applicability. I spoke about that already as well. One thing we've implemented in this new set is a change procedure. Prior to this, we did not have a very simple method of modifying these plans, but included in this, in fact, in the front of the manual is a change form that anybody in the public or the private can submit a request to the city to recommend a change to these procedures. And there could be several reasons for that. Perhaps a material is no longer available, or there's a new and better material possibly that is available that they're recommending we consider. And again, this is not a perfect document, so there may be, out of 600 or 700 pages of this document, there's bound to be some inconsistencies in there that someone will come across and want to get some clarification or want us to fix. So also included in section 1 are the applicable codes and standards. We have to follow a lot of different state laws and regulations, so those are all included in there. And then the plan submittal requirements. This is really a tool to help the developers as well as our review folks here. A uniform set of plans with all the information on it that we want really simplifies and expedites the review and lets the developers more efficiently build and get to where they want to be with their projects. Also included in section 1 of the financial guarantees. These are the bonds. In case something happens, we will have a mechanism to recover money to either put the project back to completeness, or at least to cover any future expenses that the city might encounter by one of the developers not completing their work. Also include our latecomers agreements, and that's really a mechanism for private developers to get reimbursed from future developers that connect to their utilities. And also included in section 1 are variances. It's somebody who feels that they have a unique situation and that these standards don't quite work for them can request from the city a variance, and that's something that we face all the time and give due consideration to. Next slide. Thank you, Kim. Section 2 is the construction control and inspection, and this is really what happens after the plans are approved on paper and they start off out in the construction. Really, our primary duty of the city in situations like this is to kind of look out for the future owners of the facilities, be it the city many times, or for example, a homeowners association. So we really want to get a quality product put in the ground that's going to last a long time. So section 2 lays out our authority to enforce these standards, as well as field testing procedures, really in that case, verifying that the contractor is meeting the standards, and then control of material. We also look closely at where they get materials from and certification tests that the materials they're putting in the ground meet the criteria that we lay out. And also included in section 2 are traffic and site controls, so that during construction, the contractor is setting up a safe environment for the public to traverse through. Section 3, next slide, please, Kim. Section 3 is the water section. It spells out how water mains are to be extended, as well as the water services and meters. The meters obviously provide us an accurate method of billing the private properties for the water that they use. Fire lines and hydrant connections, we work very closely with the fire department. Our water system is really a two-part system. provides not only drinking water, but it also serves as our fire suppression system in case of fire. So we work very, very closely with the fire department for hydrants and things of that nature. Another very important component of the water system are the backflow prevention assemblies and cross connection. The interface between the public system and the private system is very critical. We have a lot of manufacturing that goes on down here. So the backflow prevention and cross connection is set up to ensure that nothing that is done on private property has a pathway to get back into the main system and contaminate our water main. So that's a very, very important system. And again, included in section 3, just like the other sections, are the material specifications, the construction procedures, such as in this case, cleaning and disinfecting. And then in the case of water, the overarching document that we follow is the city's comprehensive water plan. And we also fall under a lot of criteria that are dictated by the Department of Health. And included in section 3, as well as the next 2 sections or next 3 sections, are the standard plans that we want the contractors to follow. So section 4 is sanitary sewer. Again, similarly to the water, it spells out the criteria for extending sewer mains, as well as the connections between our system and the private system. Lift stations, we don't have too many of those in the city. We try to avoid those. We try as much as possible to use gravity. Sometimes that's not possible with the terrain that we have. So we do have criteria in there for lift stations. And then private grinder pumps are really a single family house that may sit down below a street and want to have their own private pump to pump up into our gravity system. So we have criteria in this document for that. And again, like the other sections, we have material specifications, the construction procedures, and again, the overarching document in this case is the city's comprehensive sewer plan. And we have standard plans as well in section 4. Section 5, moving on, is the stormwater system. Again, similar to the other ones, it spells out the criteria for extending the city's storm system, as well as connections between the private property and the city's stormwater system. Pump stations, we have a couple of those that are under construction presently and a few more that are coming in the near future. We've worked very hard over the past, couple of decades to alleviate the low-level flooding that we have here in the valley. So pump stations form a big part of that. So most of these are done by the city themselves as a mechanism to avoid, like I say, this low-level flooding. So this spells out the standards for that. Also included in section 5 are detention ponds, which are a big part of treating and detaining the water before it is discharged into our storm drainage system. And one of the newer things that have come up over the last 10 years or so is the usage of low impact development. This new version of the standards has incorporated a lot more of low impact development into the standards. It's something that we'll be working very hard on in the near future. And again, like the other sections, we specify the materials of the stormwater system, the manholes, pipes, and pumps, and things of that nature, as well as the overarching goal or overarching manual in this case is the Kent Surface Water Design Manual. So that's really something that we've worked very hard in over the years. And then in this case, we do have another overarching state agency, Department of Ecology. We are what's called a phase 2 general stormwater permit. It implements our NPDES, our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. Again, a very big part of treating our stormwater before it gets discharged into, in many cases, the streams and rivers around here. And again, section 5 incorporates standard plans. Section 6 is one of our larger sections. It is one of the most visual sections that we have, and that is certainly the street system. It's something that everybody sees every day. And included in this section are right-of-way dedications. When a developer comes in, for example, they're required to, in often cases, to dedicate property to build frontage. And in many cases, they're required to build their own frontage. So this section spells out those. It also spells out the street types and the dimensions of those streets. For example, if it's a principal arterial or a minor arterial, this document will spell out the dimensions of those different types of roadways, as well as the configuration of them, whether they include a bike lane, whether they include a wide sidewalk or a planter strip. And so this really lays out all that criteria. It also spells out, again, the required improvements that the developer has to do. Again, whether it has to do, depending on where the street is, planter strips, bike lanes, things of that nature. And also included things I've already mentioned, the Meet Me on Meeker street design, special street design standards, the downtown overlay, and there are also some other sub-area plans such as Midway, Rally the Valley that are incorporated into these plans. And also included is access management, and that's really limiting the number of driveways. Driveways are basically conflict points onto our major roads. And our big part of our street system section of the plans is to help control that a little bit better. And then next slide, please, Kim. Then wrapping up the street system, also included in section 6 are, like I say, driveways, sidewalks, and the non-motorized facilities, the design of intersections. And again, like the water system, we work very, very closely with the fire department on our roadway layouts so that not only can they have enough water to fight the fires, but also have the ability to access and do U-turns when necessary to get their apparatus to down our streets and where they need to get to. So we work closely with the fire department on these. And then the roadway appurtenances that you see there, these are the things that are behind the sidewalk in often cases. It's really for the safety of the roadway, sight distance and obstructions, things of that nature. Also, a big part of what our group does is traffic control devices, the signs and markings, as well as traffic signal systems. All this is laid out in detail in these standard plans. And then this, mentioned the street lighting system. And again, just like the other sections, we have the material specifications, the construction procedures, and then the overarching document of which you've heard a lot from April recently about is the city's transportation master plan. That is really the overarching plan that we follow with our street system. And there are some other standards as well that we follow, a lot of national standards, the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, which dictates a lot of our signs and markings, the AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. It's called the Green Book because it's green. And that really spells out a lot of the criteria that we and most other jurisdictions in the United States follow. I'll just point out real quick too that we do have state routes in the city. So on those state routes, the Washington State Department of Transportation has some input depending on the classification of their control over it, but they do have input on those state routes. So there's other overarching standards that we have. So next, thank you, Kim. So a quick overview of the update. Why are we doing these? It's been about 11 years since we did it the last time, and since that time, there's been new construction techniques that have come along, many changes in state law, as well as permitting agencies. I mentioned the NPDS that got implemented and the stormwater permit. So a lot of changes in state law and permitting, as well as updates. We've done a lot of updates to our comprehensive plans, and those updates need to, the changes that were made in those updates need to be incorporated into our standards here. As I mentioned, permit requirements, as well as changes in city code, and really a lot of industry changes. There's a lot of new products on the market. Some of the older products that we specified are no longer available, so those all need to be changed. So again, it's just been, after 11 years, there's just been a lot of small changes that have grown to the point where we need to do a big general overview and fixing up a lot of things. We've done a lot of internal coordination. It's really involved every group in the city, and Suzanne Smith has spearheaded this effort quite well. Worked very closely with ECD and planning, who have been really major contributors to many parts in there. And we've worked close with the law department, as well as all the other public works sections. Mostly, we've got a lot of input from our operations sections because they're the folks that need to maintain all of these facilities when they're done and accepted by the city. So they had a lot of input about each of these sections in there. So next steps, we will be working a little bit with the Master Builders Association. Master Builders Association is they're kind of a nonprofit, and they represent home builders and suppliers. They've been around for quite some time. They're really a kind of a government advocacy group that represent builders. So we'll be working with them to review our plans and maybe give us some insight. We'll be going in front of the Land Use and Planning Board to present this. And we are currently doing SEPA. We have we're proceeding with that, and we'll be publishing that very, very soon. We also have to work with the Washington State Department of Commerce. And after these things are all done, we'll be returning to you at the council for adoption of these. So with that, it's a lot of work. That Suzanne spearheaded. There's a lot of pages in there, a lot of information. And I'd be glad to answer any questions I can, or Suzanne. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. Any questions on the design standards? I see Councilmember Boyce, you have your mic off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Mark, maybe slightly confused. So are these standards, we have them already in place and we making updates to the standards? And if so,
Correct.
I couldn't tell what was the update versus the old version to the standards.
Well, you mean as in we've done, basically the sections are all the same. We've really just done an overall change, updating really pretty much every section in the plans. So the old document, if you looked at the old document and the new document, you'd see a lot of things in common. But like I say, it's just really a lot of overall changes to it.
Okay. And the last time you made changes, you said been how many years you say since
2009.
Okay, cool. And we making updates now because everything it's because of the laws and trying to get in line with everybody else, or
yeah, it's just time to do it. There's been enough changes that it's important, because really the overarching thing is to convey to the developers of what we want to see. And so, like I said, there's been so many small changes that have built up over the years that it's just important, I think, to do one massive overall change in adoption.
I think I'd be interested to see when you come out. I'd be interested to hear what the Master Builder Association, how they feel about some of these changes and so on. So I get it. So hey, thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Mark.
You bet.
Thank you. Just kind of to follow up on Councilmember Boyce's question. So we made changes back in 2009, and then we're making these changes. So we don't have anything in place to make changes like every 10 years or there's nothing in place like that. It's just when we feel like there's been enough that it needs to be updated.
That's correct. And like I say, in this newer one, we have implemented a change form. So there will be the code says that they're adopted by you, but there can be minor changes made. And there's a question of, well, what's a minor change versus a major change? In this case, we thought there were enough changes that we needed to bring it back to you for approval. And like I say, moving forward, we do have an easier mechanism in place to make some of those minor changes.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Fincher, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. So Mark, I'm familiar with what SEPA looks at with individual projects, but what would they look at in our design standards?
Not a whole lot, to be truthful to you. The document is, like I say, it's an environmental document. I think the only thing that they would look at is if there was some type of change in there that would somehow affect the environment. For example, something maybe related to stormwater or something of that nature, but it's very, very little. The non-project SEPAs are normally relatively simplistic and don't receive a lot of input, but it is a process that we have to follow.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mark.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Moving on, I'm going to welcome Chad Bieren to talk about the 2021 Asphalt Overlay Project.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Council President Troutner and council members. This is just getting everybody familiar with our proposed locations for the 2021 pavement rehabilitation or our overlay locations coming up next year. Kim, next slide. This is a map that shows the progress that we've made since 2013 when the B&O tax and the solid waste utility tax were adopted by council. And I just wanted to start here because I think it shows a lot of good progress. Now you can see the unhighlighted streets represent a large portion of what's left on the map, but we've also made a lot of progress. And this shows this is actually a working map that operations uses to keep track of where they're at in town and how they're coming along. So you can see the green area is guardrail. And any of you that have ridden around with Tim in the past and looked at guardrail locations that get hit quite often, this is not just one guardrail. This is most likely several guardrails at the guardrail locations. But the overlays themselves, the blue lines or the asphalt overlay or inlay, that's a combination of our contracted overlay locations where we use an outside contractor and also our in-house group that will do overlays with our own equipment, along with our sidewalk or concrete crew, where we've made improvements to sidewalk locations that have been in really bad shape. And then locations where our in-house crew have done traffic calming or additions to the system and for traffic calming. So again, over the last, this is 2013 through 19 or 7 years of construction, we've made a lot of progress in a number of areas throughout the city. Next slide, please. The basis of how we move forward with the program and choose where to overlay is our pavement condition index. And that's where council's authorized contracts in the past where we have a private company go out and they measure the condition of the pavement throughout the city. This is also used as a basis for a number of our grant applications. So you have to have a certain level of pavement condition index, a certain minimum in order to qualify. Outside grant agencies want to know that you're taking care of your pavement on your own before they want to give you money to help you out. So those pavement condition indices or the reports need to be kept up to date. This is an older slide from 2018, but it just gives us an indication of where we should be spending our money. Next slide, Kim. So for 2021, these are the locations shown, or locations shown on the map, the locations where we think the next best money would be used, or best locations for using the money available. This represents probably more work than we're going to be able to do, but we've selected these locations based on the PCI, the amount of traffic they get, and then our total benefit that we see from the project. And then trying to guess kind of what the market's going to do with regard to the price of pavement. That's obviously the major component of the cost of doing the work is the cost of asphalt itself. But that's very volatile. We'll see anywhere from $70 a ton all the way up to $140 to $150 a ton, depending on the application. So it can go up wildly. And it depends a lot on the economy. We got relatively good prices this summer because there weren't a lot of people traveling. So the amount of oil available was greater than some other summers. So we're going to move forward with these locations, assuming that we can get a fair number of them done, and we'll adjust what we come back to with council through a contract award based on how those prices are looking. Next slide. So for our business and occupation tax projects, those are the projects that we tend to concentrate in areas in the valley or up on the east or west hills around commercial areas. The majority of the money this summer is going to get spent on 212th between East Valley Highway and 72nd, where we were able to get a federal grant through the last funding cycle of PSRC. We were able to get $1.4 million to go toward that project, but it's about a $3.5 million overlay project. This is our most expensive street because it's our widest one. So it's 7 lanes of pavement. We'll go through and grind and overlay the entire width. And so again, that's a lot of money, but it also is one of our major arterials, obviously, and gets a ton of truck traffic. It's one of the reasons it scored so well with the grant agencies is because our truck traffic is in the neighborhood of 10%, which is a really high percentage of trucks. So again, that'll take up the majority of D&O money for our contracted portion of the work. Next slide, please. Thank you, Kim. In-house grind and inlay and also overlay, where we use our in-house crews, we have a number of smaller sections of roadway on James Street and 228th where we have localized pavement failures that just need to get taken care of. And we don't think we have the money to do the entire road, but we can do spot sections of it with our own equipment and our own crews. So the next slide shows the guys who actually do the work. And you'll see that on the right column, the asphalt crew. And of course, the two left columns, sidewalk and concrete crews, they'll either do concrete paving and or sidewalk repairs under Brent Collins as a supervisor. And then Joe Rockto works with our pavement engineer. That's a currently vacant position, but we had a gentleman in there last year that worked with Joe to develop the locations for the overlays. And then of course, we work it through Bill Thomas, and he gives us the thumbs up on where we should go next. So again, in-house inlays, grinding inlays, 72nd Avenue South, a number of areas, particularly north of 196th, where we need some attention. Next slide. Military Road, the shoulders along Military Road are asphalt. The main portion of Military Road is concrete that's been there for many, many decades. And the ride quality in certain areas, it's a little bumpy, but the ride quality overall is pretty good. However, those shoulders are deteriorating, as you can see in these pictures, and we need to keep those in good shape for any kind of inclement weather, or people go around cars that are trying to take lefts, and you can really get some bad conditions out there. Also, obviously, this is a main, one of the good thoroughfares along the West Hill for bicycles. So we want to make sure that shoulder is in good shape for non-motorized users. Next slide, please. 108th Avenue South. This is just around the corner from the Home Depot and moving toward the 272nd corridor. So a well-used roadway and in need of some attention. Next slide. And then East Valley Highway. We were able to get a federal grant. I'm sure most of the council will remember authorizing or accepting the federal grant for the section from 196 to 180th that we did a couple of years ago. We were able to do the overlay. It looks really nice now. The unfortunate part is the section from 196 to 212 did not score for a grant, and for two reasons. One, we outscored it with another section of 212 west of the Green River Bridge up to Aurelia, which is a section that we'll be doing in the coming year. And also the PCI, the Pavement Condition Index, in the section between 212 and 186 was on the lower end of the acceptable range. So we lost points for that. So our plan is to go in with our crews and do major pavement rehabilitation areas where we need to go in and grind it out, repave. We'll have kind of a hodgepodge in there of areas that look new versus look old, but it'll give a better ride quality overall. And then our plan is to go in next year and do a chip seal on entire sections of that portion of East Valley Highway to keep it in good shape between now and when we can try and get another federal grant, which we think is in the federal fiscal years 25 and 26. So 2025 and 2026. So we're trying to keep this one together and keep it as a good candidate for a federal grant so we can try and get another $1 to $1.5 million federal grant. So that's our plan on that section of East Valley Highway. Next slide.
Just really quickly, Councilmember Larmer, you have your hand raised. Did you have a question about a previous slide?
I can wait till the end too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. On the solid waste side of things, one of the major costs working in the neighborhoods is rehabilitation or replacement of curb ramps to meet ADA requirements or Americans with Disabilities Act requirements. Most of the ramps that have been constructed over the last 30 years, a number of them meet the requirements and other of them don't. So when we go through and do a replacement, they'll run anywhere from $2,500 to $7,500 per ramp. And if you look through many of the neighborhoods where we've replaced the ramps, that adds up very quickly and reduces the amount of actual overlay we can do. So it's just something of note that when we analyze where we're going with our next round, we take a look at how many ramps we're going to be improving throughout the neighborhood. But it is a requirement of overlays to improve those ramps. Next slide. So in this round of overlays, we're going to move into Scenic Hill. We overlaid a lower portion Wrighton Road several years ago. But the remainder of Wrighton Road, East Maple Street, Woodland Way, and South 267th, the major spine that runs through Scenic Hill, is in need of repair. And for those of you who've been up there, it's pretty apparent that it needs some attention. So we want to overlay that entire section, and it's pretty lengthy spine, but it's necessary. Also, not a lot of wheelchair ramps through there, so we think we're going to be able to go a fairly long way for our dollar. Next slide. The next area we think needs some attention is 94th, 96th, 93rd, this section between James Street and our new corridor connection on 218th, where the 224th project is coming around to 218th. This was used, portions of it were used also as a haul route during the 224th construction, so we didn't really want to get into it until that work was completed. Now that it's done, we want to get back in there and take care of that entire roadway. There are portions of it that are really not in great shape. So also a good candidate for overlay, and also not a lot of wheelchair ramps in that area. Not that we're trying to avoid wheelchair ramps, but we're able to concentrate on areas that get a lot of residential traffic and can get us a lot of benefit for the dollar we're spending. And then on Lake Fenwick Road, we're going to try something new this year. If you'll see on this map, on the north end, we've got an overlay, a full overlay that's necessary just because of the condition of the road. But south of there, we think the road itself structurally is in pretty good condition, and we think that we can preserve it for quite a while using chip seal. So next slide, Kim, please. Chip seal, folks have seen them if you're familiar with them. Basically, you end up putting down a layer of asphalt oil. It's kind of shown in the picture there. And then go back through with a layer of rock that you lay on top of the oil, and then you roller it in with a big mechanical roller and get it to stick together. There's not a structural section to a chip seal, but it seals off the asphalt underneath and provides a little wearing course for to give you several years. Generally, they're good to 5 to 7 years of a lifespan, as opposed to like a 15 to 20 year lifespan for an overlay. But they cost about a fifth or a quarter of what we would spend on our overlay. So you might say, well, why don't we do those more often? You have to pick the right roads for it. You have to make sure that the conditions are just right. And we think Lake Fenwick is a good candidate for it. We haven't done these for a number of years. They did them years ago, back in the 80s and 90s. And there are times when the quality of the pavement at the end isn't as nice as an overlay. So they received some complaints when they used some of these chip seals in some neighborhoods. And so we backed away from them a little bit. We want to try them on some of these more through roads like Lake Fenwick Road, where it's more of a traveled road rather than it is a neighborhood street. So it's something we want to give a try to. And if it works out, we'll use it in other locations where we think strategically it's a good idea. Next slide. So going back to using our in-house crew, we have some smaller sections of road that have just need some repair. This is on 269th and 271st Place in the southwest corner of town. Next slide. (114th). This is just north of 256th. And again, just in need of repair. Next slide. 124th, north of Kent Kangley. And this is an area that we'll have to do a little extra work on this portion in doing the overlay. You've seen those areas that are really raveled out and are in pretty bad shape. And then last slide, just again, the map showing the various locations. And again, this probably we're showing more than we'll have money available. We think that we're going to be able to do, obviously, if you started up in the upper left corner, those sections along 72nd, 212th with the federal grant. We absolutely need to do that next year. We are confident we'll have enough money left over to do those repair sections of East Valley Highway. If we have money available, we'd like to go up and finish a section of 208th east of the Benson. That needs some attention. Also 248th, just south of Clark Lake Park, between 124th and 132nd. And then 256th east of 116th, where also the pavement there is in need of some work. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you so much, Chad. Councilmember Larmer, you've been waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chad. I really appreciate the presentation and it breaking down, what we're doing where. I like, that we're going to try the chip seal. I think anything that's 20 to 25% of the cost of a normal project, if it will suffice, would be great. Do have a question about military. You'd mentioned the shoulders and the bike lanes. What opportunities do we have to improve the bike lanes? Because I also think with all of these projects, I wonder too about, children walking to school and, sort of some of the opportunities for safety. How does that factor in? And when we see grants, how does locations near schools, do those things factor in?
Yeah, the council adopted the Complete Streets Ordinance several years back. So we take each of these through a process where we meet with parks and ECD and talk about locations where we think we can make improvements with each of the projects if they make sense and if the money is available. On a project like Military Road, and just to be clear, we do have plans for full-blown bicycle lanes and Military Road as we improve that roadway. But right now, we're still kind of stuck with the shoulders that we have, and they operate as bicycle lanes, but we don't have them designated as bicycle lanes. We just want to make sure that they're available for bicycle travel. But yeah, we do look at each of these projects and working as a group. Then we'll meet with Mayor Ralph and say, hey, okay, this is kind of what we think we can do by way of improvements for non-motorized users. So it is part of the program.
Thank you. And then one more question, if I may, Council President.
Yep, go ahead.
So kind of just an odd scenario. So my husband got a newer car recently, and it has the lane adjustment to it, and we're having some issues with those the hot patches have a reflective quality that actually throws it off, and so it's constantly trying to straighten us when we're already straight. I don't know if have we heard that complaint. That
is the first I've heard of that, and I'm actually really glad you said it. I've been, my poor son has to hear me talk about these things from time to time, and I've told him I am terrified at the standard we might need to keep with regard to pavement markings and lane assist. And yeah. I'm waiting for that day when we start to hear, hey, your pavement markings aren't keeping up with my lane assist, and I can't drink my coffee, and it puts me back to normal. What's going on?
Yeah.
But no, that's actually great feedback. I would take that back to Joe and talk to him about that. It's first I've heard of that, but I've wondered when we would start having issues with something. I just figured it'd be pavement markings, not the pavement itself.
Yeah. It seems, especially those hot patches where, we drive along 208 frequently, that section you have there in green. So that's usually where we notice it.
If we could talk offline, I might want to get a little more information from you, because it might be like the tar line or a number of things. I can geek out for a while on it that way.
Okay, thanks. That's all.
Very interesting for sure. Councilmember Boyce, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Chad, a couple of times I heard you say if we have enough money, right? So if I think about the West Hill, right? You talked about Lake Fenwick and also Military Road, as Councilman Larmer talked about. So I heard you say quite a few times if we have enough money. So do you know for the West Hill what's going to get done if we have enough money?
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure that when she's showing this map, for instance, the North Fork Garrison Creek neighborhood, there are some remnant pieces of the Chestnut Ridge neighborhood, which we did the vast majority of last summer, where we could go back in and do some of the cul-de-sacs or side streets back in there. And I don't know that we're going to make it that far. That was my cautionary side coming out. We with the in-house money, we will have the money to finish Military Road. We are doing the Lake Fenwick work. We're feeling pretty confident that those three long sections, both the Lake Fenwick Road, the Wrighton, Maple, Woodland 267th, and 93rd, 96th, 94th are going to get, those will be the premier spots, and we'll have enough money to get those done.
Cool. Thanks, Chad.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Michaud.
Thank you, Council President. Chad, thanks for the presentation. And I was just going to let you know that I too have those problems with the tar on the road, especially on 277th coming up the hill.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. You guys are making me a little nervous. I'm going to be talking to Rob Brown too.
I think I need to get a new car. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Can you turn that feature off?
I know you can turn that feature off.
Yeah.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. Would Chad, we've had conversations about adding a third lane on parts of Military. So would those other improvements be done before that and then the lane added later on? Or is there talk about doing all of that at the same time?
Yeah, the third lane of Military is going to have to be a complete improvement and reconstruction of Military. There are several places where we'd want to target that, and it's closer to the north end of Military and at Kaelene in the commercial area first. And then probably some of the churches and I know the fire stations right up there where we'd want to, and some of the other major neighborhoods where we want to concentrate left turn lanes. But that would not be done during this portion of the work. We'd end up having to do a reconstruction to get that done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other questions or comments for Chad? All right. Thank you again, Chad. Thanks for answering all our questions.
Thank you.
All right. And the last presentation we have for the workshop today is Hayley Bonsteel and Kaelene Nobis, the Kent Housing Options Plan.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for having us this evening. We have a pretty high-level presentation for you tonight. So this is really an opportunity to start making sure that we're all on the same page about the overall policy direction for the Kent Housing Options Plan. So Kim, go ahead and get us started here with our next slide. So you're all familiar. You may not have heard our new name yet, K-HOP. We thought that had a nice ring to it. And really, we do want to focus on options. So that's why we went with Kent Housing Options Plan. So this builds on the data collection that I spoke with council about back in, I think it was September, that from our Socchio partnership, and really tries to, move us in the direction of something that the city of Kent as a whole and the community as a whole can get on board with. And as we all know, there's a lot of tentacles to all of the issues related to housing. So tonight I'm going to be talking about just sort of the high level buckets under which we might talk about all those different issues. So this is kind of the first opportunity to really discuss as a group, how we want to steer this policy direction. So like I said, it'll stay high level, but that's because I didn't want to come to you all with a long list of detailed policies before we had, at least gotten on the same page about the overall direction. So this first little bit just reminds us of sort of the trends and the needs and where we came from with the Socchio data collection, which really showed that, with home prices being so much higher and rent being so much higher and income shifting over time, there's a lot of need at a lot of different levels of the housing market. In particular, there's really a need for this 0 to 30 very low income household, very low income rent households, as well as that 100 plus AMI. So it's really this unique situation of what I believe the mayor has called the bookends. So jumping right in then to, what can we do about these things? Skipping over all of the sort of problems that we've discussed in the past of like all of the many needs, kind of hoping that you all are tracking with me from then. Go ahead, Kim, to the next slide. Thank you. This is kind of what I'm seeing as like our high level 4-part policy framework. And the first 2 are the really meaty 2, and we're going to talk about each of these. And then the last 2 are a little more lightweight, but they've got some really key pieces that don't really fit under the first 2. So I'm going to talk about each of them and sort of why they're important and the examples of the kinds of policies we would see under this heading, and make sure that council feels that the different priorities that you all have can be accommodated within this framework, or let us know if you think there's something else that we're missing. So let's start with preservation and displacement prevention. We have the highest number of what's called NOAAs, naturally occurring affordable housing units, even in South King County at the 50 and 80 AMI level. So this is really I think, a really stark finding from our data collection, because I think it's safe to say that if we have the most in South King County, that we have the most in the county as a whole. I don't think there is another city that has more units at 50% AMI or 80% AMI than the city of Kent does. And so preserving those units and preventing displacement seems really, really key. So a couple examples of what we would be talking about under this kind of policy framework would be things like the mobile home park. Oh, sorry, go backward one for me, Kim. We're still on this last one. I'm going to just verbally talk through some examples for each of them. The mobile home park preservation policy study that we're doing, I'm very hopeful that will result in some really meaty preservation policies for us related to not only the prevention of displacement of mobile home park residents, but also the long-term preservation in terms of making sure that we have good health and safety parameters in place for those mobile home park units. So that's an example of one that I hope will have a lot of good meat on because we're doing this parallel study. This would also be where we would talk about tenant protections. And I know there's interest in that, and there's a work group working on that. So go ahead and advance 2 slides for me, Kim. So that was preservation and displacement prevention. The second one is really probably the one that has the longest list of examples. This is to grow and diversify our housing stock. So that's obviously very broad. But I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page about, that we know we can't not grow, but we also know that we don't want to just grow in any direction. We don't want to grow in the direction of having more and more of the same kinds of things. So while we need to it needs to be sort of two-pronged, that we must keep pace with growth, but also increase the diversity of the stock. So we're having a little bit less of that concentration that we're starting to see. So the really big strategies here would be some of that missing middle kind of housing. And that's, the kind of duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, smaller multifamily buildings. Some of those are allowed right now, but we have this framework of, okay, they might be enabled, but are there barriers? Could we remove barriers? Okay, they might be enabled, but not have barriers, but should we incentivize them? And so there's these different levels that we want to take a look at different housing types to say, are they allowed on the books today? Have we removed barriers to make sure that it's possible to build them? And then have we actually, potentially incentivize them if they truly would contribute to a more diverse housing stock? So a few of the other ones that would fall under here, as in the way that I've conceived of it, would be scrolling through my notes. Apologies. Yes. Increasing potential density around planned transit, such as bus rapid transit on our East Hill. That's an example of something that, I don't think we have really grappled with yet. And I was just in a call today where I connected with some King County Metro staff about potentially joining forces there. Boosting homeownership. We know that we have about half of our residents as owners and half as renters. And, are there ways to increase the ability for people to move from renting to owning? And then, incentivizing those market rate rentals where that needs to be incentivized through, MFTE or other programs, as we've discussed, that need for the 100 plus category that doesn't seem to just naturally occur in Kent so much as the 60 to 80 is what really naturally occurs in Kent. So those are the different types of strategies we would consider under this umbrella of grow and diversify. And there's going to be a lot here. So I anticipate that if you folks are good with this kind of overall direction, that there's still going to be a lot of meaty conversation to be had within the detailed policies that we develop under this one. So the last two, which Kim can move us forward towards, are a little bit lighter weight, and the only reason that I say that is that they may not have a zillion policies under them when I come back to you. But if you agree, I think that we do need to kind of point ourselves in the direction of, we know, and everybody probably thinks their city is unique, but I'll tell you from the data, Kent really is very unique. We have the highest household size in the entire state. And we have a very diverse population, as everyone on this call is well aware. And so there are certain things, for instance, communal housing that, the state legislature comes up with ideas for, city regulations that cities should adopt related to communal housing. And they might be not thinking about the different ways that communal housing could actually look in Kent, given our population. So that's the kind of thing that I'm not saying that we wouldn't we wouldn't take guidance from others, but the guidance that that might come out really may not be that applicable to Kent. And so I really want to point us in the direction of doing our own research, doing sort of our own proactive analysis, so that as the state or the region have these interesting ideas, we can really tailor them to our unique needs. And that also includes ideas about aging in place or senior housing. We have a lot of seniors, and there are lots of good resources out there for I think they call them age-friendly communities. And so some of those may be perfectly applicable to Kent, but I think that there's some unique facets of life in Kent, specifically, when you have homeowners who want to remain in their homes versus downsizing. Like, are we providing the number of options that people in our community are looking for? Those are the kinds of things that I would like to point us in a policy direction of saying, we will, meet the ideas or the requirements of the state or region or county, but we'll do it in a way that works for us. And then the last one is a little bit similar, but it's really about telling our story. So you've probably heard me say this a bit, and it really just pulls on all the others. But I'm in meetings now all the time where I just see how people are bringing so many different perspectives to issues about housing. There's a lot of very strong advocacy. There's people who want to see, just as many units built as possible, and they don't really care if they're all one kind of unit, as an example. And so with just such a wide array of people, and more and more the legislature, more and more electeds at various levels are really trying to get in and really tweak with our zoning codes, which, honestly, I welcome it, because I think that it means that folks are interested in solving this issue. And I think that's amazing. But I think it really speaks to the fact that whether it's with PSRC, with the county, with the state, with our neighbors, with staff, we really want to be telling an effective story. And we've heard this from the development community, that they need to understand what a city is looking for to be able to come in and propose a project that's going to be successful. So this last policy bucket, if you will, would be pointing us in that direction of saying, okay, we want to take opportunities to inform and collaborate. We want to build relationships. We want to make decisions together. We want to engage with housing providers, so that we're not just sort of sitting back and waiting and twiddling our thumbs and, hoping that the right housing products just pop up. And instead, we're actually out there saying, here's what we're looking for. Here's what we want. Here's why we want it. Here's how it works for our community. Here's what we'll do to help you be successful building here. So that's the fourth policy directive. It's really trying to get at that idea of telling our story. So I'm going to turn over to Kaelene briefly, and then I'll pick it back up at the end.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to go over kind of where we're at and what are our next steps. We're currently in the outreach and information gathering stage. We have a website and survey that went live in late October, October 22nd, actually. And we've ramped up our outreach on social media in preparation for some live Zoom community meetings, which is what we determined would be the best way to engage the community during COVID times. We actually even got a shout out on the mayor's weekly update this last Friday, which increased our engagement on the survey a ton. So the first of our live Zoom public meetings is this Friday, November 20th, 2020 at 2 p.m. It's really easy to remember, 2020, 2 p.m. So share it with your friends. But also we have a link to our survey here as well. While we're working on that, we're also continuing our mobile home park outreach to hear from those stakeholders using our consultant on that portion of the project. After all that, after the new year, we'll move into kind of the compilation stage of our outreach and the formulation of what will result in a KHOP policy document. We'll be returning to LUPB, Council for Workshops, public hearings. You'll see a lot of us in the beginning of the new year through June of 2021, which is when we have the anticipated adoption of the KHOP document. So I'll turn it back to Hayley.
Thank you, Kaelene. And so, like you see here, you will be seeing a lot more of us. We'll want to flesh out what we talk about this evening, and obviously incorporating what we're learning from the community. Kaelene has just done an amazing job, so I really encourage you to check out that survey and join us for a meeting if you're able. But for this evening, I would really love to hear if council has any feedback on the four policy sort of orientation I'm picturing arrows, vectors, if you will. Kind of, do we feel that what Kent needs in terms of housing can be accommodated within those 4? Are we missing anything? Are there any that we want to make sure are absolutely included within those? That kind of thing. And with that, I'll put myself on mute and turn it over to you all. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Corey, you have your hand raised first.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Hayley and Kaelene, for that information. My question is regarding the survey. How are we reaching the diverse communities? Are we doing it in different languages? Are we reaching out to other nonprofits, faith-based organizations? How are we getting their feedback?
Yes, I can speak to that. We've had to kind of reinvent the wheel a little bit with making sure that we were getting out to everyone. We intentionally embedded the survey into our website to be able to use the city website's translation capabilities. I've partnered with multimedia and to get as much out on social media as possible. And then I've also actually been reaching out to, I have a partnership that I've created with the King County Housing Authority. They're actually going to put a link to our website in their workforce development newsletter, and a staff member and I are going to go around to the housing authority and do some flyering together. We also presented at the Cultural Diversity Initiatives group to get some feedback there on how we could have some more outreach. And I've reached out to the to the school district, because we know that a lot of people who have English as their second language that have kids in the school district, that's a good way to reach them as well. So we've been had some of our local grade schools actually put out our website and our survey information in that way. We haven't had a ton of engagement yet, but we're over about 150 survey responses, and I've been pleasantly surprised of the some of the demographics we've gotten on that. It's definitely not enough, but we are utilizing a lot of different tools at our disposal for that, and definitely willing to take suggestions as well if we've missed anything.
Thank you. I'll send you an email. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Councilmember Larmer.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the presentation, Hayley and Kaelene. I know that, Hayley, we've had these conversations before, but I just refreshed my memory. So when we are talking about 50 to 80% AMI in Kent, are we still using the AMI for the county? Because I know that's been coming up a lot in the regional conversations, is that a lot of this policy and guidance that's being drafted, I mean, they're factoring in East Side and Seattle when they figure the King County AMI, and we know our AMI is significantly different. So when you say that, we're targeting 50 to 80% AMI in Kent, is that Kent's, like, I guess, a Kent actualized AMI?
Yeah, great question. It's funny, actually, I'm definitely hearing a lot of, I would say, questionable uses of AMI around the region. So area median income is set by HUD, and we can't actually calculate any other area median income, because the A in AMI refers to a HUD designated area. And that's a wider area than even just the county. So AMI is really for like the whole Puget Sound metro area. That's AMI. When people say a city AMI, what they really mean is an average median income, or maybe a median household income. So there's a little bit of like terminology issue there. But yeah, basically, when we talk about AMI, we are continuing to use HUD's definitions, because we can't really create our own definition of that in terms of if a lender is trying to, help make a project happen. They don't really care what our median household income is. They only care about what's sort of the official AMI. So what's really important to us is to target, what's considered to be 0 to 30 or 100 plus AMI, because that is what doesn't get built in Kent. And so one way to think of this is that 80 AMI is really 100 or market rate Kent. That's sort of one way of saying that, our median household income is significantly lower than the area median income. So Marley, you may, I may draft you into helping me correct other people when they talk about cities AMI. What they really mean is median household income, not some
Right.
sort of magical unicorn individual AMI, which is not possible
Okay.
according to.
But yeah, but to your point, I just want to make sure that, we're being cognizant that, 50 to 80% AMI in Kent is not really where that lower end need is for us.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fincher.
Thank you. Hayley, so you mentioned communal housing. Is that where people buy a house, but maybe there's a separate rec room that is used by the group of housing? Are they smaller houses? Give me some information on the communal housing that you mentioned, please.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple different things that could be thought of. What you were just describing is a little bit more like co-housing, which I personally absolutely adore. But communal housing is generally thought of as more like renting rooms, almost like, old school, tenants who share a bathroom and really just rent a bedroom. And we passed an ordinance maybe 2 or 3 years ago because we had some issues where, a single family home was being rented out and has, 8 or 10 cars that are trying to be parked right around that home. And so we've noticed that the state is trying to regulate communal housing so that basically to prohibit cities from capping the number of unrelated people who can live together. So I think when I talk about communal housing in that way, that's really, the state looks at it as like just people renting a room. But there are these other very, like they don't have neat and tidy categories, but communal living or intergenerational living or co-housing are all really promising. And, I guess they seem promising from the perspective of that they add so much diversity to what's in existence today or what's available today. What's challenging about them is that they don't fit into neat and tidy categories. And so they tend to be regulated out of existence. So that's an example of one of those unique situations that I think we could do a bit of research and have, something that really would work for Kent to ensure that we're not just allowing essentially, boarding houses to be operating out of homes that were really designed for, a smaller number of people, but that we are allowing potentially some of those more innovative, or maybe they're not even innovative, but they're more ancient, of intergenerational homes that are just not well accommodated within the ways that homes have been built in the last, half century.
Okay. I know that the co-housing units, I think they have some of those like over on the Peninsula Bainbridge Island area. Are there any co-housing units where they're sharing that communal space? You have your own house, but you're sharing the place where you want to have your family over for Thanksgiving.
Right.
So do we
Right.
have any of those now in Kent?
I don't believe so. I have never heard of any in Kent, although I could be wrong. But there are maybe a handful in Seattle. You're right, there are a handful on the islands. I know there's 1 or 2 in Bellingham and like sort of small towns like Port Townsend. So they do pop up. They are quite difficult to kind of wrap your mind around. I've done a lot of research just personally because I'm really into it. So I kind of have seen the way that different jurisdictions have regulated them, and it is tricky. Some of them have, very huge minimum sizes because they are trying to be something really different than just multi, they don't just want like an apartment building in the middle of nowhere. And because as you're saying, you might have your own individual home, or in some cases it's more like a condo or a town. There's just a lot of different forms they take. I've never seen any 2 that are the same. So that is something that I think it would be a really cool project for us to do, is to figure out, how can we create the opportunity for some more of these kinds of co-housing or communal living in a way that would, respond to the needs of people who live in Kent or might want to, and without allowing, something that would basically, you need some level of accountability and responsibility on site. And that is something that I think we would have to figure out how to regulate. It's just not simple, but that's probably why we haven't seen too many happen around here.
Thank you, Hayley.
Yeah.
Councilmember Larmer, did you have additional questions?
Yeah, I did, or just kind of an additional comment there. So Hayley, on the communal housing subject, I mean, I think that's something that's something I'm really interested in as well. And I know I'm trying to understand would sort of like the workforce type housing where you have, because I continue to hear from young people that like they stream their media. They don't need a big living room. They eat out most of the time. They don't need kitchens, you know, every night of the week. So more of these like adult dormitory style housing arrangements. You know, I guess I've been calling them workforce housing. Maybe it's more a communal housing, but where does that category lie? And the follow-up question to that is, do you have any insight on why those are so difficult to develop? Because it seems to me if you're taking you could take a market rate unit, cut the square footage in half, and suddenly you now have two affordable units, and the developer hasn't had to take a loss because they're still getting, you know, market rate for the same square footage. It's just being paid by two different tenants. And so have you uncovered any research in that for that type of housing?
Yeah, well, I think, again, these things are a little bit hard to pin down into neat and tidy categories. So I think what I'm understanding, I've seen a few of these pop up in the Bay Area and maybe in Seattle, where it's like, it's this kind of like, you know, young, shiny people who use a lot of technology and, like you say, aren't cooking a lot kind of thing. And so they sort of share a kitchen. Workforce housing in general is actually defined as housing affordable between like 60 and 120. So workforce is a more of an income term than it is like a typology term. So just to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So if we're talking about that interesting form of housing, I don't know that I have a clear answer about why that we don't see more of that. I guess what I would say in general is that what I am learning through the last few years of being in the rooms with a lot more housing developers is that they are not into like risk taking in terms of trying things that aren't very well established. So I think that's why we just see so many single family homes and apartments. You know, that those two forms of housing are just very well established. And I think what we really struggle with, I think, as a region is making it more attractive to try different things. I think it's harder for them to get financing. It's harder to know, you know, in terms of design, like, will they be able to get through design review because it's a more unique form? You know, a lot of these things still have a lot of parking. And so unless they really see a very unique opportunity where they've got, you know, a college campus or like a technology campus that has just a super built-in market where they know they'll be able to sell these without any problem, I have a feel that's my sort of like gut answer is that, you know, you might be able to draw on graph paper, design something that would totally pencil, and you would hand it to a developer and they would say, well, yeah, it might pencil, but we know for sure that we can get our returns if we build an apartment building. And that's where, you know, we're just not seeing the kind of innovation we want to see. And to me, that's part of this telling our story. It's being in the room with people and saying, look, we passed some new code that allows for X, Y, or Z. We're really interested in this. We will roll out the red carpet for you to build something special here and to see if we can make something cool happen. You know, that's the best I can say. I wish that we had a little more control in that area, because I do think that this is one of the ways that like the free market isn't really helping us, because it's sort of skewing to the bottom line and the predictable income that comes from well-established forms of housing.
So Hayley, if I'm watching this presentation tonight and I see under next steps, it says community outreach happening on Friday at 2, how do I get signed up for that?
Yes, I'm going to our website. So the online survey website is here. And then I think if you just backspace the survey portion, just go to the link, but to the Kent Housing Options Plan piece, that will bring you to our homepage for everything. And we would love to have everybody sign in there and take a look. And you can sign up for any of the 3 meetings at that point. And at the moment, we don't have a big crowd signed up for Friday. So I would really encourage anyone who's interested to feel free. You'll get to have a lot of space in the meeting if you want. So hopefully that can help everybody get oriented to where to go to sign up.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions for Hayley? All right, thank you so much, Hayley. Great presentation. Looking forward to hearing more about this. And that brings us to the end of our workshop. So we are going to take a little break and welcome everyone back here for the council meeting at 7 p.m. So thank you so much, everybody. We are